I actually don't think anything gets simplified in the world. And I'm going to take it in another direction, Scott. I know what you were
Perfect.
trying,
Go
where
wherever you
you're
want to go.
going, but like if I was just to relate back to our financial system and we go back to the topic of finance, nothing gets simplified. What you really do is add on additional layers of abstraction to give the sense of simplicity when there is just layers upon layers upon layers, and then just multiply by 20 or 50 upon layers of complexity behind it. They make it easy for you to interact with, but what really goes on behind the scenes is just incomprehensible.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hands-on Logos podcast. This is where we discuss current events, personal growth, and any other random topic that crosses our minds. Our goal is to have a meaningful discussion that help us to see the topics we discuss more clearly. Our hope is we can help you expand your self-awareness, develop your critical thinking, and learn to be less reactive to the world around you. And most importantly, remember, be curious. If you like what you hear, like this video and subscribe to the channel. If you have any feedback, please leave a comment. We want to hear what you think. We appreciate you.
So hey, Chris, what is this today? It's an off day, Chris. It's
Saturday.
It's
Yeah.
Saturday,
Podcast-
8 a.m.
podcast Saturday.
And
Yeah.
it's Saturday, and this will be the 15th, no, 16th podcast, right? Wow, that's like awesome. Okay, and we have a guest today, Chris. So maybe you can introduce your guest, or Kevin, you could introduce yourself, whatever you want to do.
I'll just give a quick introduction. So, hey, folks, my name is Kevin Wang, and I'm a longtime friend of Chris's. We used to work together. Chris invited me onto this podcast because I spent lots and lots of times diving into the macroeconomics, diving into money, understanding how our systems work and what it means. And as I was talking to Chris, he figured, hey, Kevin, why don't you come online and let's have a chat directly between us, ask some questions, have a discussion. And I rarely turn down those opportunities, so I'm really happy to be here.
That's awesome, man. So, money, that's something I know very little about, although I do have a finance degree. The only thing I learned in finance school is that I should actually hire a professional because it's like really hard. So that's 4 years of school, and that's what I learned.
Yeah, it's funny because that's what they taught me in college as well.
I think the biggest thing I learned, two real things I learned in finance school is one, how to use weasel words, and no matter what the question, always start with "it depends," and how to use a 12C HP calculator. I don't even know if those are still around anymore.
No, they've learned that the calculators proved to be too difficult for most people, so they upgraded.
Yeah, because it's got that reverse Polish notation where you put it in, you put your two parameters in like on a stack, and then you get the function. Yeah. So that took a little while to like work through it or whatever.
It was too many buttons, Scott. They had to simplify.
You know, always try to simplify. You know, this is, oh my God, let's start something, right? Because I think this is really important, actually. What you just said is you've got to simplify. And I'm a big fan of simplifying things, but there's only so much you can simplify. And then you start like losing the essence of something. So before we start, can we just talk about that a little bit? Like, how much do you simplify? And most people don't simplify. Most people just throw the kitchen sink at you because they don't want to do the mental work to try to simplify things down to something that makes sense for you. So
it's funny you say that. I actually don't think anything gets simplified in the world. And I'm going to take it in another direction, Scott. I know what you were trying, where you were going, but like if I was just to relate back to our financial system and we go back to the topic of finance, nothing gets simplified. What you really do is add on additional layers of abstraction to give the sense of simplicity when there is just layers upon layers upon layers, and then just multiply by 20 or 50 upon layers of complexity behind it. They make it easy for you to interact with, but what really goes on behind the scenes is just incomprehensible.
Oh, I have so many questions for you. Yeah, but they abstract the layer out and they simplify it for the end user. Just kind of like a car, right? You just have a steering wheel and a gas pedal and hang on a second.
Isn't that what simplification? Sorry, isn't that what simplification really is, though? Isn't simplification really just you have to abstract it, right? any topic you've got has complexity in detail, complexity in information, and you're not going to be able to dump that all into somebody's head in 1 minute or half a minute or whatever. So you have to take that complexity and simplify, abstract it to another layer. And if you're lucky, the person was able to come along with that abstraction because they knew enough of the detail that you could simplify and you're still on the same page. But at some point, you leave those people behind, and you end up with a simplification that's abstracted to a point where the average person really doesn't understand any of the depth anymore. The simplification has stripped away the depth and left the people who behind who are following.
Well, I would agree with you. That's usually how you simplify, by adding on layers of abstraction. But your second part of what you said is actually where the world headed towards, right? The depth is so deep now, it's not possible for anyone to understand. And what's actually the part that really drives me up the wall is the fact that they introduce so much additional risk that for the average user, they actually don't understand. You're actually going in there, interacting with the system, making assumptions about how safe your assets are, about what you actually own, about a lot of things that aren't true, and 100% in the opposite way. For example, if you put your money in the bank, the moment it leaves your hands and goes into the bank's hands, it's the bank's money. It's not your money, right? Like if they close out, you're not getting it back. But if you go ask most Americans or anyone, they don't know that. And that's a layer of quote unquote abstraction to simplify your experience. But in reality, they took your money.
Well, what about FDIC then? Is that just does that not mean anything?
The FDIC, they are ensuring that you get $250,000 back.
$250,000 anymore is I mean, it was a lot of money 50 years ago. Or actually, when did we have the run on the bank? When did the FDIC go into effect?
But that is only if the bank fails. What happens if the bank just closes your account? Well, then you're not covered by FDIC in those situations. They send you a letter, 30 days to take out your money. You don't take it out. It's theirs.
Oh my gosh! But you do get it back. They'll send you a letter though. It's not like they can just keep it, right?
That part they do send you a letter for notification, but then after that it gets into the legal gray area, right? Like, so that's the part I'm not as sure about, but I do know when it comes to ownership rights, the bank has it first over your money.
Oh my gosh! If you're okay with this, I'm going to take this in another. Even if you're not okay with it, I'm going to take it in another direction, anyways. And
Sure.
then let's talk about ownership, because you just brought up a point that I just thought about, is that so many people, they actually own something, but like, what do you really own, or what is ownership? What does that really mean?
Wow, in today's society, I have no idea. I can tell you, I know for a fact that I don't own my home. I'll pay off the entire mortgage, but the moment I start missing property tax,
Yeah, right.
the government's going to come and take it. So is that really ownership?
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's a tough one for me, because in God's world, he talks about that you don't own anything. 'Cause as soon as you die, everything's gone anyways, and it's just going to go to dust or do something. So he said at best, you're just a steward of the assets that you have. And the better you are at managing assets, then the more you'll be given. So you sort of almost apparently God is testing you, saying, okay, let's see how you do with a little thing. And then as you grow, he'll give you more and more assets to manage.
Wow. I did not know that in the Bible. That's actually super fascinating.
Yeah. So when you talk about God's economy, it's very interesting. And then another thing that gets talked about, which I know nothing about. Don't ask me to prove anything. I just like winging stuff off the top of my head.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay.
Chris yesterday, he said, I got an example. Or no, that's not true. There's some case, and he has to give me an example. And I'm like, I don't know, Chris. I was just saying shit. Sorry. Yeah. So another example is that there's apparently different layers of heaven as well. And this is from standard Christian doctrine, is that you can get saved, you can get in, but you can get in through just the skin of your teeth. But then as you do additional works, then you'll reach more, they call them rewards in heaven, which I don't know what that means. I don't know what the rewards are, but it's just fascinating. So I just wonder if ultimately our economy isn't modeled after kind of God's economy.
Oh, there's no way. Not possible.
Not possible.
Yeah, what you've just described is completely the opposite of our economy.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, tell me about it. How is it different?
Our economy is a debt-based system, right? So the creation of credit and the issuance of debt is what drives our economy. The foundation of our economy is based upon borrowing. And through the borrowing, you drive the velocity of money. Now, for everyone, what velocity of money means is how often the money changes hands. And that's very key.
Does that make Dave Ramsey, because he doesn't like people taking on debt, does that make him anti-American?
Ooh, that's a good question. Depends on what era.
Anti-American economy, let's put it that way.
But maybe I would call it anti-1970s and a later economy.
Yeah, because the whole idea of debt, right? The fact that, we were able to take advantage of the fact that we were the currency that the world used. And so since they were dealing in dollars and we had a growing economy and all the world shoved their money into America, we had a lot of money in this country and it was moving around really fast. So you could spend a dollar, and you think about it, and obviously, when people are comfortable taking out loans, they spend money that they don't have, on the promise.
That's the American way, man.
On the promise that they'll be able to pay it back someday. And I think that's where we're hurting, because people don't have the promise that they can pay it back one day. I think there was a time when everyone thought, I will make more in the future than I do today. And I don't know if that's the case anymore.
Well, that's called slavery in the Bible. There's a Greek word called doulos, which basically means slave or servant. And that's why Dave Ramsey is so against debt, because you literally become a slave to other people. I mean, look at our national debt. Look how much we just pay. Don't we pay like a quarter of it just back in interest charges? I mean, that's just insane, actually.
$1 trillion, right? So $1 trillion.
It keeps growing, you guys. It keeps growing.
So it's at least $1 trillion, right?
Yeah. It's just exceeded defense as our largest, and it will exceed Social Security in the next 5 to 10 years.
I mean, if we didn't have to pay that debt, think about.
Social Security is what, $2 trillion? So
it's getting there. Yeah, it's getting there.
What's that? Do you say the debt or the
Social Security
interest?
Yeah, Social Security is
$2 trillion. Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah, saying it'll go from $1 trillion to $2 trillion on interest.
But then the debt is like, whoever we talk to is like somewhere between 30 to like 200 trillion, depending on who you listen to.
Yeah. Look, guys, it's, what was my biggest indicator when I go out and talk to folks and I tell them, hey, do you know how much the U.S. owes? And then I'll tell them, hey, we owe like 20 trillion, 35 trillion. And they just give me a blank stare because the number is so big.
Yeah.
People can't process it.
And
even for myself,
trillion.
I'm like,
I thought it was 36 trillion. But 36 trillion, what does that mean?
This was even back in the day. Like you go back a few years back, it was lower. But even then, when you share just trillions, most people's mind goes, shoo. They're like, what's that even mean?
I know you think in terms of billions, like $1 billion is a lot of money. And they throw billions around like nothing now, billion here. I'll give 10 billion, We'll give 250 billion to Lazinski or whatever to fight.
But I mean, companies that get bought out today, I mean, you think about it, $1 billion valuations for companies are not uncommon. In the 70s and 80s, the concept of a company being $1 billion was foreign. I mean, what the heck are you talking about?
Well, yeah, we just had companies like $1 trillion market cap just recently, just a handful of years ago, right?
Yeah.
I think Apple hit $2 trillion at one point, didn't it?
Yeah, I think wasn't Apple the first one to hit $1 trillion or something?
I think so. Yeah, Apple was the first, and then you got all the Mag 7s following through suit.
Oh, that is crazy. So, can we? Okay, since we're talking about money, what Chris and I like to do is we like to define terms. So, could you define what money is?
So, the best way to think about money, we should go with a few definitions. So, let's start with the purest sense of what money should be. Money should have 3 main properties, which is 1, store of value, 2, medium of exchange, and 3, unit of account.
Ooh, define the third one. I'm not familiar with that third one.
Unit of account means that when you go out and you look at something, that is how that something is measured. So if you go look at an Apple iPhone, it's measured in US dollars. So US dollars is a unit of account. That's how something's measured. And medium exchange and store of value is all there. If we take a look at the US dollar, it has 2 of the 3 properties. Again, the 2 properties are medium exchange and unit of account. Anyone's willing to trade you for it, and everyone's willing to measure in it. It does not store value. That's a proven fact.
It's a fiat currency, right? Which brings me to the point: is there gold in Fort Knox, or is it all gone now? Is there anything there?
Okay, so we'll take a tangent because I love talking about Fort Knox. Okay, so someone asked me this: the chance of it being zero, having zero gold, is, in my opinion, I would say less than 1%.
Okay.
So
there's something.
But you're not saying that that it isn't all there. It's not. You're not saying that.
So you could have one gold coin, and then there would be some gold there, right?
There'll be some gold there. Okay. I don't know how much. It's somewhere between more than 0 and.
He's using weasel words, like you said. Weasel words.
Weasel words. What depends?
Hey, Scott, you learned it in college. What am I supposed to say, man?
I know you're supposed to say that. In fact, everybody should say it depends, because it does. It depends. Everybody asks, like, oh, hey, what's the best car to buy? Well, it depends on what you want to do with it, you know?
Well,
but I can tell you. But there's one thing. I will. Oh, yeah. There's one thing I say about Fort Knox. The problem is, if it's not the exact amount, you have a problem. That's the real problem. Yeah. If it's not exactly what they've always reported back in the 1970s or when the last audit was performed, then you have a big problem. Because if it's lower than that, where did it go?
You know how the mind works. If I have a huge pile of something, then I can get rid of a little bit of it because I'm comfortable. I've got a huge pile. Now it's a little bit smaller pile, but I still got a lot of it, so I can get a little bit of something. And it's a smaller pile, but there's still quite a bit there, so I can get a little bit, get rid of. And as long as I keep it over, and bit by bit, the next person who's in charge of the pile says, I got a lot of stuff, and they get rid of a little bit. And so that pile of money, is it really going to be the same pile of money it was in the 1970s? The pile of gold, is it going to be the same pile of gold it was in the 1970s? It's tough to believe because it's so easy for the mind to decide, there's enough I could take a little bit off to do something.
Yeah. Well, that's one rational argument. How about the other side? Okay, we got off the gold standard because of all the problems we were having, but doesn't mean we ever lost a belief in gold. So what happens if they were adding a little bit every year?
It's a good argument. I don't believe it. It's a good argument.
We'd have a store of gold, right? I mean, do you think Parker Schnovel is like kicking back a little bit to the Fort Knox? You know Parker Schnovel, right?
I don't know.
Okay, that's Gold Rush. You haven't watched that show?
Nah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, sorry. Have you, Chris? You've seen it? No. Never mind. Sorry. Okay. I won't use it. It's an awesome show, though.
Oh, I gotta put it on my list then.
Yeah, he's a gold miner, and he's up in Alaska. And man, that dude cranks out a ton of gold. He just basically moves a lot of dirt. You know, there's gold everywhere. There's gold in everything.
Yeah.
You got to just process through it and just grind through like tons of dirt to get an ounce of gold out of it. Sorry, we're going off track. Yeah, we're like 7 layers deep now.
I once did a science report where I had to calculate the amount of gold in the sun.
In the sun?
And how much gold is there in the sun?
More than the Earth.
Yeah, exactly.
More than the size of the Earth.
Yeah, that's why we want to go to asteroids and pick up. There's just massive amounts of minerals there that are just amazing.
God, it's but like, but even though there's so much gold, there's still not enough, especially on Earth.
Well, what do we need gold for? I mean, we need it for like manufacturing, putting, gold teeth in rappers' mouths and things. But how much do we really need gold?
It's a store of value, right? Like it's 2,000 years of history of saying that it is the purest form of store of value.
Let's talk about that store of value, because I think that actually is what leads into Bitcoin mining and all the other kinds of things that are out there. That why does Bitcoin have any value at all, right? So, but talk about the store of value. What does that mean by store of value?
Store of value, the foundational. So the easiest way to think about store of value is that the amount of energy and work you put in today will hold its value at a later point in time. Because the worst thing that can happen is that you only put in energy and time today to get an immediate result. But in most cases, that just doesn't happen. That's why you get paid in US dollars, because US dollars is meant to allow you to say, hey, I put in 8 hours work today, but I'm saving up to buy a car or a home 2 to 3 years down the road. And that's what you're really doing. Putting in the little bit of work day by day to consolidate your energy and time so that you can buy something of massive value later on.
So the gold, for example, like the reason the gold has value is because someone actually went out there, dug it up, and processed it and did whatever. They put in the hours of time, they put in the dollars for the equipment, they whatever. And so let's say they put in, 100 hours of time to make 1 ounce of gold, whatever that is. So whatever 100 hours of work is worth, right? And so it's always going to have that 100 hours of work that went into that ounce of gold. And then you trade that with someone else for some equivalent amount of value of 100 hours of work.
Oh, I don't think so, Chris. Yes. I don't think so. I don't know that gold has any inherent value except in manufacturing.
But why would it have any value if you didn't take effort to get it?
So I think So Scott and Chris, it's important to go into a few sub definitions.
Yeah.
Because we define the three main things about money, right? And we understand the other two. If we go into sub definition of store of value, one, it has to maintain its value over time. It can't degrade.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Two, it has to have scarcity.
Right, a certain amount, right?
A certain amount. And three, it has to have difficulty. It can't be consistent. It can't be difficulty with technology as it goes down and down. It has to have either a consistent level of difficulty to achieve, or it has to continue to get a little harder and harder and harder.
Harder to get, right? Is
Harder to get. Yeah.
So can I summarize everything in saying that other people want it, basically, right?
Because they know it doesn't degrade, because it's scarce, and because it's hard to get.
And that's why they're going to want it.
Yeah, that's why it's going to want it. And so that fundamentally defines a lot of the factors of store of value. Now, there are other definitions of store of value, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But when I was studying and through my self-learning, I just sort of coalesced around those three factors. Because you can talk about a cow. A cow in the past was used as a barter. Well, unfortunately, it doesn't retain its value over long term, right? And that's the biggest problem.
Right. It's a short-term thing. But, it's really important because if you don't have a cow and you don't have food, you'll die. So, I mean, if you got to eat it, right?
Yeah, and that's the scarcity factor, right?
But I need it, though, right? Is why I need it.
Yeah, and this is this is why economics works so well, because as a person, you have to make a decision. I have an asset that can live forever.
Yeah, right.
But the fact of the matter is, I can't enjoy forever if I don't satisfy my needs today. So I'm willing to carve off a portion of that forever asset, aka gold, for something that degrades, a cow. Because if I don't take the cow today, I'm not going to live to enjoy the forever asset. Yeah, and this is how it all works. The system of money and flows between what you need for the future versus what you need for today.
Okay, so I got a question for you because I want to come back to this one point. It seems like wherever we go, we always come back to some form of faith or belief, actually. Mm-hmm. So how much faith or belief is there in gold versus like our American dollar, a fiat currency? Because a lot of people just believe it's worth something, so that's why they want it, right?
So I think this is probably the most powerful part about gold, which is the fact that it has been attacked by so many people to call it a barbaric relic. But even after all that time, what was it, yesterday or the day before, gold hit an all-time record and broke $3,000 per ounce.
Whoa, are you kidding me? Wow,
yeah,
that's crazy.
Highest of the high. It's still so powerful and viewed by everyone so positively.
Gotcha. Okay.
So to your point of faith, there's like 2,000 years of faith built up, and the U.S. government or other financial companies have spent the last 50 years attacking it, calling it useless, etc. And look at it; it's gone up to all-time highs now, $3,000 per ounce.
Because it has inherent value.
It has inherent value because everyone understands how scarce it is, how difficult it is to get, and how long it can last for. Because gold gold you get back from the Aztec folks, they're still around. They're still in their shape. They're still just gold. Then after centuries, it's still gold. It's just
why don't we use gold as money?
It fails the other two properties: medium of exchange and unit of account. To be a medium of exchange, it has to be divisible, and it has to be easily trustworthy and verifiable.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. So are we getting rid of the penny then? Is that why we're getting rid of it?
That goes into another discussion.
That was a political thing, right? I mean, what's the state that Lincoln's from? They don't want to lose the penny because Lincoln's on the penny.
Oh, I didn't hear that. I just heard that it costs more to make.
Oh, it does, but it has for years. It has for decades, and every time they try to get rid of it, where's he from? Not Nebraska. Where is Lincoln from? Wherever the state is, that they don't want to lose the penny because they would lose Lincoln on the money.
Oh, awesome. Okay, so there's always
politics. It has nothing to do with the cost.
So what is Chris? Define politics for me then. What do you mean when you say politics?
Someone has a particular agenda item that they have that actually serves no other purpose than to help some small group get something that they want. at the expense of others. In my mind, at the expense of others. So everything's a give or take, right? I mean, you look at the fact that every tax dollar California spends, they only get a certain amount of it back. Other states, they spend less and they get a higher percentage of it back, right? That to me is that politics is steering where that tax money goes, because there's some other value someone's trying to get out of a group by giving something for support or for whatever for those particular people.
So Chris, so that go into the human nature then, that just inherently the vast majority of people are just selfish. And like if you had an even, like let's say you had like just a pie, right? And there was two of us. Are you saying that the average person, I'm saying the average person would take more than half of it?
I think there's two factors at play. One is your tribe, your people, and the other one is your selfishness. And they can balance out. Like in a tribe, if it's, you may not attack, you may insult your friend or your family or your brother or your sister. But when something comes to hurt the group, you defend that same person.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Right. So I think depending on where you place the conversation, it could be I'm out for everything I can get. I think politicians themselves specifically are out for themselves, but they use their tribe, the people they represent, to kind of hammer things around to make things happen. So I think they know how to use the tribe and give the tribe what it wants, and then they themselves benefit. It's like what is it? Leaders eat last. Simon Sinek, right?
Yeah.
Like they make sure that
that's definitely
everyone
not
else
politics.
In the tribe...
Leaders eat. That's definitely not politics.
No, but the idea is you make sure everyone else gets a share, and then at the end you get the biggest share.
Yeah, I know, right? And it's interesting what they'll do. Yeah, the people say, look, if you're going to take care of me, I'm willing to give you a little bigger share because if I don't give you that, then I'm not going to get anything potentially.
So the leader of the tribe takes care of everyone else at whatever level's appropriate. The warrior gets more, the weakling gets less, or whatever, right? And then the leader at the end gets the biggest share because they made sure that everyone else got enough.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's the idea of leadership, right? I know, not that people do that, but.
So, Chris, what I want you to do, if you can, you don't have to, but I just want to somehow, I want to reason up as like a first principle, like our whole system from just basic human nature, because then if we can understand this, or if I can understand it, what it means then is that now we can, no matter what the scenario, we can predict an outcome based on human nature.
Well, let me interject there. I don't think our current financial system was driven by basic human nature.
Oh, interesting.
I think our current financial system is truly a representation of the free market working.
Well, but isn't that though human nature driving free market though?
I guess, but if we're going down to like the basic, because what I'm trying to say is I don't think selfishness or greed actually played a role. It's more about convenience and speed.
It wasn't Wall Street. He said greed is good.
Oh, greed is good because it drives ambition. I guess there's one way to look at it. But I want to say, like, it's not like we reset the financial system. It's just been evolving ever since humans have been alive. So it's just evolution, building on evolution, building on evolution, building on evolution, and we're just at the next stage.
The free market's just the environment that we, meaning our society, created, right? Because other societies have different environments for their economy to grow. So the economy grew as it grew, but our environment would be what we call the free market.
Oh, I would actually go a step beyond that. I wouldn't say like, U.S. has a free market and China doesn't. Rather, there's only one free market and everyone participates at it. And if we go back to your leadership example, right, like you have one whole free market of where you have multiple tribes. And in those tribes, they have different tribes. And in those tribes, they have different tribes. And if you take a look at one free market, the top layer is all the nations competing with each other. The layer underneath is all the political parties. So I guess in the U.S. it'll be red versus blue, or you can call it the states. And then you go level and level and level. And each level has their own economy. And the lower you go, it's possible the more regulated it is or the less regulated it is. But once you reach the top, it's a free market because there's no one that regulates governments.
The free market is actually something that exists outside of human creation because it's just the exchange of value, exchange of product or
wait
whatever.
Hang on a second.
Wait.
No,
but where I'm going with this is that the free market is actually I don't want to call it a force of nature, but it is something that exists. It's like the universe. It is a thing that exists that is not, in fact, something that we control in and of ourselves. It just grows naturally.
We can't. We might be able to control the little tribe, our little tribe of folks, of how they operate and such. But you can control them as much as
the American government, the whatever government.
Exactly. But But regardless of how you control them, you are going to come up ahead or behind the other players. So, for example, the U.S. with its regulations, its way of viewing, its financialization.
The tariffs. Let's go with tariffs.
We'll go with tariffs later. Or whatever. But all those choices have basically set U.S. behind on manufacturing versus China, right? So, the compounding of those choices have made it so that China is now the factory of the world instead of the U.S. And that's just the free market playing out. We made decisions because we prioritized what was internally more beneficial to us versus how we would compare against our peers.
Every company that exported its production was not thinking about national safety. They weren't thinking about the national ability to produce PPE goods during COVID. They weren't thinking about all those things. They were thinking at the bottom line dollars and how much it costs and how much money they can make, which was just optimizing for profit. And by doing that, the other priorities weren't even weighed into their calculation. At some point,
exactly.
The government might have said, "We don't want all these companies to leave. We'll give you benefits to stay." If they could have done that, right? But what tire manufacturing left, so much of car manufacturing, so much of other manufacturing left the U.S. to where we don't have the infrastructure to build the way we did in the 50s and 60s.
So can we summarize it? Just agreed then? I mean, just solely, I want more than you? Because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to derive down to the actual root cause, and everything else is built up from it.
I don't think there's no single root cause for all humans. I would say there is some kind of very small middle ground that the free market's very good at finding. Because I think even if we go with the concept of greed, I would say I'm very greedy about the time I get to spend with my family, whereas someone would be very greedy about the money they have. Whereas other folks would be very greedy about the attention they get. Right? Greed is by itself driven by so many different forces. It's hard to pinpoint what that all means.
Well, is it because money is a metric that we all understand inherently? It's easy to understand, or at least the way the society's built it, so that I can now measure success. I can now measure my value. I can now measure all that stuff in dollars, where that's hard to measure when it comes to family life and personal life and spiritual life. Financial, I got a metric, and therefore if I can optimize for that metric, and when I talk to you, I can say I'm optimizing for this metric, and you go, oh, I want to get in on that. And so suddenly we're all focused on this metric of money, which is profits and the like. And it's an easy thing for all of us to get an alignment on. Whereas well, is it important for me to have 5 kids or 3 kids? Is it important for me to have this kind of family life and this kind of spiritual life? We're not in alignment.
That's a part, and that's why
it's human nature to go with what they align on, and they align on money.
The one thing I will say then, if we really want to go down to the basic, where greed and money intersect, is that money is the single most powerful innovation that mankind has ever made.
Yeah, we invented it.
We invented it 4,000 years ago. It persists to today, and it is the single most important product. So get rid of your concepts of money and just assume it's a product. That's why everyone goes after it, because it's the only product in the world that can basically give you 95 to 99% of your desires. Yeah. There is nothing else in the world that can deliver 95 to 99% of your desires but money.
So is it safe to say then that money is the ultimate commodity then?
I would say yes.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, because so let's go back to Bible times. It's really interesting because they would measure wealth not in terms of money, but I had 400 cows and I had 700 sheep, and that's how, and I had 22 wives, and that's how wealth was measured. And then so literally, if you wanted to get married to a rich guy's daughter, you'd have to come in and say, okay, I'm willing to basically buy your daughter with 22 cows and 7 sheep. And, the highest bidder would win. And I think it's crazy.
Yeah, it's just, and I guess they're, oh wow, that's how they measured money back then, huh?
Yeah,
But
through actual assets, through things that were that had directly stored value. That's all they cared about.
yes, exactly. And then ultimately, everyone values money differently because of what they can use it for. And that's like the biggest freedom anyone can have in the world. And actually, it's even more powerful than freedom of speech, is freedom of transaction.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's interesting. Yeah, because I get to buy what I want with my money. Now let's go back because I'd like to dig in a little bit. You said that money will give you most of your desires. Now, I don't know that it's the actual money, but it's the energy that's stored in money that I can get other people to do things if I have money.
yes. But then how do you, but that's where money is so powerful, right? Because it's that abstraction of the energy. I mean, again,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because,
yeah.
like, let's say, for instance, I don't want to mow my lawn or I don't want to pull weeds, right? Because it's
Hmm.
just work and I hate it actually. And then so if I can get somebody to come out and say for $50, probably nobody would come out for $50. But as I start raising that up, I could start getting anybody in the country to come out if I paid enough for it, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, if you put $10,000, if you tell me you're paying me 10 grand, trust me, you let me know where your house is. I'll book my own flight. I'll be out there. I will mow your lawn like you have never had a mower before.
And
I
that's
promise
amazing.
you.
That's
That's
where
right.
all your celebrity trainers and your celebrity makeup people who they go to the house of the celebrity. I mean, it's they're getting fame and stuff, but they're also getting paid well for it.
They're
Yeah,
getting
yeah.
paid well because they're catering to the needs of that celebrity, actually.
Yes. They're willing to
But
pay, the celebrity is willing to pay so that they don't have to move. They're
so
willing to
Scott,
pay to do
money's
it in the
not the
comforts
problem.
of their home.
Money is not the problem. I would say money is just like a gun. A gun doesn't kill people.
Yes.
Money doesn't
Yes.
do bad things. People do bad things. They use money to do it.
Well, yeah, but I'm going to caveat that. I'm going to argue against myself, actually, because it's different, though, Chris. It is different because a gun is designed to kill people, right? Like if you take an
No, no,
AR-15,
no, 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 no. I would disagree with that. A gun is designed to
Oh.
kill animals for hunting, and
no, let me
We have co-opted it to kill other humans.
no, let me rephrase that. I'm gonna clarify that. An AR-15, right? America's favorite rifle is designed to kill people. Period.
Yes,
It's
and
not for
again,
hunting,
that's
right?
not a gun. That is a specific gun.
Yeah, that's a specific gun. Yeah. Yeah, but in general though, a gun represents a form of power, right? It lets
So
me
does money.
yeah, right, exactly.
It's
Yeah.
not. It's not physical power. It's energy or work power.
Yeah, energy. It's an idea that I can get people to do other stuff for me.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean,
You can do. You
money
can
can
use
buy
force. You can use a
guns.
gun too, Scott. You could use a gun to make people do things for you too.
You can, but there's more risk in that. There's, because then you're coercing somebody, and people don't like that. Maybe it works one time, but it may not
Well,
work
yeah,
10
but
times.
the government can just print $1 billion more and give that to someone and tell them that they're and pay them to go do it.
No.
And
Hey,
Well, we do
Scott,
that all the time.
you actually brought up a great point. Because right there, like, if you use a gun to force someone to do something, everyone's going to look at the gun holder unfavorably. If
Yeah,
you
right.
use money to pay someone to go do something, everyone looks at the person who accepted money unfavorably,
Oh, that's
ah,
interesting. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right?
yeah,
Because,
that's
like,
true.
if you talk about bribes, no one looks at the briber and be like, "Oh man, that guy is not good." They all looked at the person who accepted the bribe and it's
Who
like,
took the
"Why'd you
bribe?
accept the bribe?"
Yeah, yeah. It shows a character flaw, right? Or
Hmm.
something. Yeah,
And then you don't look at the system that incentivized them to take the bribe.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah, we just
It,
assume greed and as a bad thing, whereas it could be they're not getting paid enough to be able to ignore this. It isn't that they're out to get a luxury life. They're just out to get a good life. There's a distinction there. So,
yeah.
or our healthcare system is so bad and they have someone who's in desperate because that's what they always show on TV shows, right? My mom has cancer, my wife has cancer, my kid has cancer.
Yeah,
If I
right.
give you $500,000, I can finally get them treatment. Of course, anyone's going to take that money. Hell, if I was put in that situation, I would take that money.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So can I do this? I wanted to find something. I wanted to find money just a little bit differently. If
Sure.
that's okay. So and I think it's the same thing, but I'm going to define it as a tool or an energy that can be used to take care of other people's sorry, the other way around. If I take care of other people's concerns, then they'll give me money for doing that. That's like the essence, right? There's an exchange of value.
Yes.
But it's an exchange of value of a commodity that inherently has no value, except that everybody thinks it has value.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
so I'm going to define truth. So I want to go one further. So Chris and I were talking about my definition of truth which is a slippery slope if you start digging down into that, is that you and I agree on something that we consider that true.
Yes.
Damn, that was easy. Thought you were
no, that's very easy.
That's our truth. But if you talk to someone who doesn't agree upon it because they're coming from a different framework or a different mindset, then we're not in agreement on the truth. So there's two things. We could agree on the facts and not agree on the truth. The problem now is we don't agree on the facts even, which means that we'll never agree on the truth.
So, and hence why, Scott, I think we keep going deeper and deeper.
Yeah, because I want to understand the essence of, what I'm trying to understand is I want to try to fully understand something. In my opinion, you've got to label it, you've got to give it a name, and you have to understand the true essence of it.
Well, so maybe another way to think about money then isn't about because I think the way a lot of people tend to think about money or tend to think about an asset that stores value is that it delivers something tangible, right? So whether it be house, is the easiest one because you own it, it goes up in value, that's great. But you can also live in it. It provides you shelter from the elements, etc.
It's inherent value built into it.
Inherent value built in.
Yes.
Would there be value in the fact that the asset or money in this case prevents or solves unobservable problems or untangible problems? So ones that you can't feel.
Yeah, that's potentially. Yeah, I mean, I know this is not the right answer, but insurance is kind of that way, right? I'm willing to pay to transfer risk, basically, is the way I view insurance.
Yes, and so maybe money is that. Because if we go back to all the way 4,000 years in the past of why money was invented, it was there to solve a simple problem of Scott, you had wheat.
Yeah, right.
But you wanted milk.
Yeah.
Okay. Chris, you had milk.
Right.
But you wanted shoes, and I had shoes.
Yeah.
But I wanted wheat. But without money, this trade will never happen because you had nothing to offer Chris. Chris had nothing to offer me, and I had nothing to offer you.
Yeah, right. So we had to invent money. Exactly.
So money solves the problem that couldn't be observed, which was the fact that without money, you couldn't actually trade, and people get what they want. But they all agreed on something that you will willing accept today and in the future after that. Then it solves all these problems. So
problems, right?
And there are cultures in the past who've tried to control trade by controlling the money itself, right? Cultures. What are those island cultures where they have the huge stones or the money, and you can't even move them; they're stuck where they are. But I own that stone, and you own that stone over there, and I want to buy this, so you can have a quarter of my stone. And some they're doing bookkeeping to figure this out. But it made those what do you call it, the medium exchange, the ability to do transactions slows down when you have a difficult currency, and therefore you're able to slow down trade. Let's say you didn't want a lot of trade. Because trade meant foreigners coming in. Trade meant, I don't want foreigners coming into my country. So I'm going to control that. How do I control it? I make it really difficult to spend money.
Can we talk? Yeah, it's interesting. So when you talk about this, so let's say you go into a casino, right? You give them $100. Well, okay, let's up there. Let's give them $1,000, right? Let's get into reality. And they give you a bunch of chips that inherently only have value for that casino. Like if you take those chips out to another casino, they're going to look at them like, yeah, what do you want me to do with this?
Yes.
Take them back to the guy that actually has the money, which is interesting because in my mind, governments for all intents and time, basically the government or the guy with the biggest stick would typically create a currency that so its citizens could trade like an exchange of value.
Yes.
They'd be a little stamped little coin or something like that or whatever it was,
Yeah, and it wasn't really the exchange mechanism of why governments did it. It was just to give quick verification, because the worst thing that can happen to money is counterfeiting. So So when you think about governments creating money, all that, like this is where I go back to the free markets. The biggest problem you want to solve is counterfeit. And by having the government be the only one that issues it, everyone, quote unquote, trusts the government and hopes that, and the government, if they start issuing fake money, they immediately lose trust and they lose their position of power. So it was actually a fairly well designed, a figured out system by humans, by people long ago. Is that, you know, if you centralize at least this portion, a lot of the problems inherently disappear. And if it does pop up, you have an enforcement mechanism and where people are naturally brought together to fight a common enemy.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So if you had a way, if you had a way to trust transactions even without cash or dollars or currency, then you could in fact have an economy. If like a debit card, right? A debit card knows that I have money in the bank. But if let's say we didn't have that, and just Scott trusts me that I will make sure that if he gives me something, I've got the wherewithal to give him something in value back, and you've got the same thing, and we could trade IOUs or just, you know, verbal verification in a small enough organization, a small enough tribe. You trust because you know what other people have.
Yeah,
so
right.
if you promise me that you're going to give me the next buffalo you kill, you know, then I trust that you're going to be able to go kill the next buffalo, and everyone on the tribe, and I kind of rely on that trust. But at a global level or at an international level, national level, we're not going to have that level of trust. We don't have a system that has the ties into to give us the trust. So we have to have systems that do that, and money is a system that does.
Money is the only system. And guys, like, you have to understand, money is so powerful. It is the most beautiful technology ever designed. Because the only thing in the world, like, if I was just to take like our microphones, right? If you think about what it took to go into these microphones, there's gold circuitry, there's silver circuitry, there's silicon, there's plastic, there's whatever the spongy materials made, and that comes from all over places from all over the world. Money is the only thing that's able to get everyone to collaborate in such a way that the flow of resources naturally make it through the different supply chains, different countries, different skill sets to finally land a product that's cheap enough, which is key, cheap enough so that we can all purchase it and use it for a podcast like this.
I mean, that is fascinating.
You're making the Seth Godin argument about the pencil. He's got that whole pencil argument where he talks about the components to make a pencil are very expensive, and how can you make a 50-cent pencil, with all these components? And it's because we have a system that allows us to optimize, and we use it. And money's the way we keep score and measure things to know that we're doing it right.
And to move it. And the most powerful thing is the money talks in a way where it transcends languages, transcends culture, transcends human behavior in a lot of ways. You name it, it transcends all of that for this kind of collaboration, whether it be a pencil, whether it be a microphone, to come together to make a great product. Because the shitty ones just don't survive.
Yeah.
Right, because nobody wants them. It doesn't have inherent value inside of it.
Or it doesn't have enough value.
Yeah, right. And we set price based upon that. Well, that's not worth $1,000, but that microphone might be worth, I'll give you $50 for it, but not 1,000,
Exactly. Yep. And so these are all the things that money solves, right? So but you can't observe it. If you didn't realize the problem exists, you would never be able to touch it. But once you know the problem exists, you realize money is the only way to solve the communication barrier, the cultural barriers, the whatever barriers that would have traditionally kept this from being created.
Which is so fascinating, because let's talk about credit cards for a minute. Like just last night, I needed some air tubing and little connectors and stuff. So I went online. I basically just ordered it. I put my credit card in, and cha-ching, it'll show up in a couple days at my door. I mean, that is freaking awesome, actually. And I don't have to pay for it now. I have to pay for it later. So can you describe, what happens? Like, can you see the series of events that happens? Like, where does that money come from? From what I understand, it just literally gets poofed into existence. It's not even real.
Okay, now we're going to the world of fiat money. Oh, God, you guys. Okay. Let me just put it this way. What does fiat mean? Fiat means it's paper money. What does paper money mean? Paper money let's just go back to what Chris says. Our whole economy will work great if we can keep track of IOUs. And that's exactly what a paper money is, an IOU.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
That is an IOU because technically speaking, before we got off the gold standard, that piece of paper allowed you to, at any time, take it to go exchange it for gold. And
right.
It was hence gold back. But then no one wanted to exchange for gold because gold comes with all those problems we talked about earlier. You can't. It's hard to divided into smaller increments.
Yeah.
And then it's hard to verify because who knows if it's just gold plated and inside is a brick.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So those are the things that are difficult about gold. So hence once you take a piece of paper, you realize, okay, that piece of paper, we don't know what gold bar it does. We can exchange it for, but we don't care. We know it's a gold bar it can exchange it for.
Right.
We don't have to take on the risk of dividing it into components or verifying it's real gold.
So can I stop you just for a second? So then the money, the paper, is really a pointer or a representation of something true that has true value into it.
Yes.
It's like a proxy, right?
Yeah. So it's just IOUs floating around.
Yeah,
so
right.
Now once you have that in your mind, you can sort of say like, okay, putting IOUs from paper into digital is very easy. So hence, you're already exchanging IOUs. What's so difficult about taking the IOUs we're already exchanging as a perceived way of value and putting it into credit card form?
Yeah.
So now once you get past that barrier, you're like, okay, so credit cards are just another IOUs. So what you're essentially doing is you're borrowing IOUs that someone already has of IOUs for something else, etc. That's where the system starts to make more and more sense. Now, if we want to go into technical details, Scott.
Yes, please, yes.
If I put in $10 into the bank is allowed to take $9 away from me.
Yeah, right.
And give it to someone else.
Gotcha.
And then once that person deposits $9, they're able to take $8 away and so forth. Right. And so from off of $10, you can technically create $90 to $100 worth of money.
What's that called? I forgot that in school. What's that? I forgot that.
Fractional reserve banking.
Yeah, like is that required reserve ratio or whatever? And so the banks indicate that. So okay, let me ask you a question then. So let's say
why don't you explain what that is for anyone who's listening who doesn't know what that
means?
Oh,
that's good because I know it. Okay, got you. Yeah.
Yeah, so fractional reserve is just saying the bank is not required to keep if you were to deposit $100, the bank is not required to keep all $100 in its safe. Is because as we talked about earlier, the bank technically owns the money. They can do whatever they want with it. With that said, thus what they typically do is they lend out the other $90. They are required just to keep a fractional reserve of roughly around 10%. And sometimes it's even lower depending on the kind of regulations that flow through.
Which is so interesting because when you think about that, you think of literally like money as a product. And so if I want to loan you money, there's a fee tied to that loaning you money. Because I take some sort of risk because you may not pay it back, right?
And that's the interest rate, yeah.
That's the interest rate, right? Exactly.
That's the interest rate.
So one more question. So let's say this, hang on a second, my mouse went crazy. Let's say this mouse, right?
Yeah.
So I go to Amazon, I put my credit card in, this mouse was $100.
Mm-hmm.
So now, technically, when do I actually own this mouse? Because I don't own it now because I still have liability that I have to pay to the credit card company, right? And let's assume they're going to collateralize this. I mean, I know they're not for $100, but let's assume they're going to come back. So do I technically only actually own that mouse as soon as I pay off my credit card balance, or?
Technically, yes. So what you're asking about is the difference between transaction and settlements. Mm-hmm. Okay. So those are two different things. Most people treat them as one and the same because for most small payments, it happens at the same exact time.
Gotcha.
But but with credit cards, that's a great way of identifying the difference. So transaction is when you buy something and they send it to you.
Mm-hmm.
And then what you've done is you paid in the form of an IOU. Mm-hmm.
Right.
You paid for an IOU. The ultimate trade does not get settled until 30 days later once you have covered the IOU with cash.
Oh, and as long as I do that, then I don't have to pay any interest at that point.
You don't have to pay any interest.
Which
interest is just a transaction that keeps going and going and going until final settlement.
Oh, okay. So basically, they're saying I loaned you $100, and you're gonna have to pay me 30% a year on that $100.
Yes, unless you pay off in, let's say, 1 month. So if you pay off in 1 month, then you don't have to pay, because the interest payment comes on the first day of the next month.
Yeah,
right?
Unless you carry a balance, then you have to start paying immediately.
Yeah,
on it, actually,
you have to start paying immediately.
So,
on it. Yeah.
One thing that I've never really thought much about, but we're talking about banks and credit card companies right here. In a normal transaction using cash or barter, even, it's between two people. I want something, you got it. I give you something of value, you give it to me.
Yep.
In the case of a bank, I'm asking them to store it because I don't want to take the risk of keeping it all. Or maybe there's some other value because maybe the bank has multiple locations and I can take advantage of that. But the bank then is not going to, out of the goodness of its heart, hold my money. That's why they're given the ability to go ahead and loan it out, and they make a little money off of that.
Yeah,
there's other ways to make money too, but they need a way to exist, and they make money by using my money, but they're giving me some level of risk adjustment, risk. They maintain some of the risk because I don't have to hold the money anymore, and I may get some of their advantage of it.
Right.
In a credit card, I don't want to carry money around, so I say I want to go buy this. It's no longer a two-party transaction. It's going through a third party who's now representing the flow of money, in essence, right?
Yes.
It's an IOU, but it's a flow of money. So it just occurs to me that every time we add a third party into this, they've got to make money somehow.
Of course.
Which means they're introducing complexity. They're introducing more cost into any transaction, right? This happens multiple times when you have multiple layers of people in there. And I think people don't realize that a transaction, when you go to a bank, when you go to a merchant and buy something, is not you just giving the merchant money. There's much more to it that's going on in the back end.
Oh, there's a merchant fee.
We don't even think about that's there.
Yeah,
There is. You're absolutely right.
And I used to deal with a lot of small businesses, and everybody's like, I hate doing that because I have to pay anywhere from 2 to 4% as a merchant fee. And I'm like, well, do you want a business? Do you want to sell anything? It's like that's just a cost of doing the business, because most people are not going to be able to pay cash. Most people are not going to write checks for things. I mean, that just doesn't happen. Everyone's just put the plastic out, and merchants hate that, and they get abused by the credit card companies. I mean, it's an abusive rate at times.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So
absolutely.
So I mean, think about that. So I guess then what you want to be is you really want to be a bank, because you're taking it from both ends simultaneously. I'm getting 4% off the top, and I know you're not going to pay it because you don't have the discipline, and so now I'm going to get 30% interest off of this. I mean, it's beautiful. Yeah,
but you're not even, Scott. You're just looking at the stuff you interact with. Don't forget the blank check you get from the federal government if shit goes downhill, right? So you have no risk either. Like, you can do all these shenanigans, and if you do something wrong, the taxpayers will bail you out. So yeah, you absolutely want to be a bank.
The money, that's the one. That's what I've always heard. That's the ultimate thing. The problem with that, though, is the demons come get you, because then you get so greedy, right? You're just and I know you provide value, but it's like, it almost feels to me, I'm placing a value judgment, which I probably should do. It feels to me like you're getting paid way more than what you deserve,
Completely agree. Banks do play an important role. If we look back and we say, like, hey, there are no demons or there's nothing bad about banks, they play a very important role as being allocators of capital in the economy. They help move the money around so that everyone has the same opportunity to access it, provided that they should put in the same effort and the same ideas. Whatever you name it, banks play an important role. The problem I keep watching is that banks are now abusing that kind of power and responsibility that was put forth on them.
Yeah, they're greedy.
Right.
Hey, let's talk about hard money. Let's say you want to start a business and your credit's not great, so you go get hard money. Can you talk about that a little bit and the downsides of that?
Hard money? You mean like gold?
No. I'm talking about hard money lenders, actually. So essentially, they'll loan you money at an exorbitant interest rate, and there could be potentially physical consequences to you if you don't pay it back.
Check cashing or criminals?
Kind of like criminals, yeah, a little bit. I mean, I don't.
unfortunately, Scott, that is one area I don't really dive into, so I'm not able to talk much about it except the fact that Hollywood tells me you shouldn't do it.
No, because this particular case, there can be health consequences for you if you don't pay, because you'll get a visit if the money's big enough and you don't pay it back in time.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of those places, 'cause I think they've been run out of business. I hope they've been run out of business, mainly because money is so easily accessible now. Even if we just talk about small business loans, you might think like, you don't have to go get the 30 to 40% from loan sharks anymore.
Yeah,
There's so many apps out in their own world. There's so many, there's just so much capital flowing around. And even if you are even if you can't find the money, I think given the amount of capital and the ease of going to find money today at just far lower interest rates than what you would have gone historically, tells you that your idea is probably not very good. Yeah. That's usually when people ask me, I'm like, if you can't find money and no one's willing to lend to you, X, Y, and Z, your idea is probably not very good.
No, you're right.
You should go back to the drawing board and think about it.
Yeah, your idea is go sell something. Because my philosophy is I've ran a small business for a long time, and my philosophy has always been fund through sales. Always sell it first, make them pay first for it, develop it, and then own it. I know Chris and I were talking about this other day, which is kind of a strange idea, but it works like crazy if you can frame it properly. So let's say I want to develop a piece of software. I'm going to get a customer. He's going to pay me for the development fee, and I'm going to structure it in a way where I get to own that asset. Because in my mind, you want to own assets, something inherently of value that'll kick off cash to you later.
The power plays of the past 50 years has been to borrow money to grow. Because capital has been so cheap, it's always been borrow and borrow and borrow. I love what you stated because that was a formula prior to, I would say, 1980s, 1990s. That's definitely the way to go. But in the past few decades, if you're not borrowing, you're doing something wrong. You're just not scaling fast enough, and you're not taking advantage of the financial system and all it has to offer.
That is so crazy because so everybody agrees with that. Like you take a Grant Cardone and he loves doing that. That's his game, right?
Yeah.
And then you take a Dave Ramsey, which has a nice chunk of money too. I think he's worth like 300 million or something. He's like, don't do that because it increases your risk significantly. So just his personal feeling is he'd rather slow the growth and reduce the risk, actually, which is just more of a value judgment.
But for the average person, their ability to handle risk and their competency to be able to navigate this make sense. For 90% of the people, maybe Ramsey's right. And for 10% of the people, maybe Cardone's right.
If you have a lot of self-discipline and control, and certainly everybody agrees, don't do it for consumer debt. Maybe borrow for business debt, but never for consumer stuff. If you want the 50-inch plasma TV, it's like, no, and you're going to put it on a credit card, just don't do that.
Unless you can pay off the credit card immediately.
Yeah. But I mean, you got to control your desires at some point, which is always a problem I've had a challenge with is self-control and discipline.
Yeah.
But Kevin, we were talking about banks and how they're in a position to kind of be an advantage when it comes to the money system. And you and I talked, I think last time or the time before, about the flow of money and how being closer to the source of money gives you massive advantage. Can you talk a little bit about that and who's at the source of money?
Okay, so we'll start with the flow of money, and I'll just give a little bit of definition. The flow of money of what we want to get into here is how the money flows through the economy, and where does it originate, and then how does it keep flowing from one party to the next. Now, the most important thing is understanding that given our fiat economy and our fiat system, the closer you are to the printer or where the money originates, the more powerful you are, the more benefits you get, and the more you're able to stay ahead of everyone else. And unfortunately, that's at the expense of everyone else. To give everyone a sense of what that means is if the federal government printed, let's say, $1 trillion, that $1 trillion has to be put into the economy somehow. Well, so they're going to spend it. Where are they going to spend it to and who are they going to pay? They're going to pay their employees, the federal employees. They're going to give it to the banks. They're going to give it to the NGOs, and they're going to give it to defense contractors or anyone else who works with those guys. they got the first printing of the money. They will see the initial boost from that money printing, giving them the larger raises, the more impactful increases in standard of living. Those employees and everyone who got the first wave of money printing will then take that increase in standard of living and start to go spend elsewhere. Maybe we'll just pick on a defense contractor. A defense contractor got an increase in living. So what will they do? They will go buy a nicer car. They will go buy a nicer house. They will do it irrespective of price. And that is the part where things start to get ugly. Because they do it irrespective of price, it starts to give signals to the broader economy that, hey, like this price is actually the right price because people are willing to buy more of me without me having to give more discounts.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, Chris, you're on mute if you're talking.
What does irrespective of price mean?
It means that if there was a car that used to be worth $30,000, a lot of people will wait for the manufacturer to come in with either a 0% APR for financing, some kind of cash back, or more features. Whereas this person would be like, hey, I need a car today. I'm just going to go out and pay full retail price.
Right.
That's because they have more money now because they're the first one to get it when the government produces it.
They're the first one to get it.
They are flush with money, and so they're willing to pay the premium price.
They're willing to pay the premium price without the discounts that all of these companies usually factor in because they understand if I make this, I can only sell, 5% of my cars at this price.
Yeah, right.
All of a sudden, you suddenly got all these folks with extra money, and then their cars get pushed up to 10%. Oh my gosh, my volume of cars that are being sold at full price when I expected, hypothetically speaking, 5%. Guys, I'm just pulling that number out of thin air. Don't take it for what it is. It's more illustrative for this example. All of a sudden, now it's 10% or 20% of my cars being sold at the full price. Yeah. Well, what do? You're like, well, my business model runs on me selling this at 5%. So I'm going to increase the price until it gets back to the 5%.
Yeah, right.
Now,
right.
Unfortunately, that pricing signal filters through the economy a lot faster than the money does. Yeah. Why? Because let's say they go buy a car. Well, the car company starts to see the increased sales. The car companies, or most companies in general, only give annual raises. So depending on where time it is, you have to wait, well, let's just say 23 weeks, right? This was in the middle of the year. You have to wait 23 weeks before you get that pay bump. And it could be higher because the business is doing better. Instead of thinking 3%, you also get 5%. Well, that's great. But that pricing signal is probably moving in much faster. So this will be the second layer. We'll say the car company's second layer. Well, the car employees, they got their raise, but it's just now matching or staying ahead of inflation by a little bit. And they're going out buying food, and now they can buy more organic food. They're not waiting for Kroger or other supermarket chains to put things on discount anymore. They're willing to buy full price. They're not waiting for the 5 for 50, get $5 off for $50 grocery, right? They're willing to just pay the 50 without the $5 off. Kroger gets the signal. They start increasing prices. But, you've already started to see that price effect flow through the economy. Unfortunately, some companies are further and further away from the printing, don't get hit with the velocity of the money until much later. Yeah. But that price has already been moving up. So they only start to see the money flow through as inflation has already surpassed them.
Yeah, right.
And
right.
The farther
Sorry, when you say printing, you don't physically mean like printing. You just mean like poofing into existence, whatever it is, right?
Poofing into existence, yeah.
Okay, yeah, right.
Yeah. And there's many ways to do that. The government hides in 20 different ways of how they poof into existence, but they're poofing it to existence.
Yeah, that's kind of great. I know I felt this, and it's a crazy feeling. So I remember way back when I was much younger, I was like absolutely broke. Credit cards totally ran up until we sold our company. And I think, I don't know, I got like 700 grand just dropped in my account or whatever. And instantly that day, I would go around, my whole emotional state changed. And my first thought was, everything is so cheap, was my first thought.
Yes. So you were giving the price signals. But luckily, see, if it was just a one time for one person, it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, right,
you don't give enough. But when when you're affecting defense contractors, NGOs, federal employees, all the companies that work with the federal government's banks, you're affecting like maybe hundreds of thousands of people. They're all of a sudden giving the same signal in the economy.
Yeah.
And if we talk about, hey, here's like the volume curve based upon price of what companies would normally expect, if this side starts to increase, they're going to shift the curve because they believe that there's more customers that are priced inelastic. And they're going to shift the curve until they get back to their nice little range of this is typically how much we should be making.
So this is crazy. So then is this what happened with school systems? Because money was flowing so easily, schools are like, let's just raise the tuition and we'll get a degree in philosophy that you're lucky to make $10 an hour, but we're going to charge you like you're going to come out of school with 200 grand of debt or something. I mean, is that what happened? The money was so easy to get. This is the same thing with housing prices. Remember way back when you didn't have to do any income verification. As long as you have a pulse and you're breathing, we'll give you money, right?
Exactly. This is always what happens.
So I think there's two aspects of that, right? There's the trade schools that they really, they gave out, they convinced everyone that you needed to go to a trade school and you needed to pay a lot of money, and they gave you easy loans, and now there's a huge amount of people there. There's the traditional universities, which the prices went up, but I think the prices went up for a couple of reasons. One is because easy money. The other thing is that they started to take on more and more things, more and more majors, and from inside they're like, oh, we need to have this subdivision major and this major, and suddenly you've got department after department that you got a bloated infrastructure to support 5 people who've got a major that no one cares about anywhere in the world.
You can't even get a job, right?
I think you've got two different things going on there when it comes to that.
But Chris, I would argue, right? Like if the money supply wasn't free flowing, you would never have the other stuff.
Sorry, you're not allowed to say but.
Oh.
We decided we don't say yes, but we say yes and.
You got to remember the word and, actually.
Oh, gotcha.
We say but all the time. We're trying to condition ourselves to say and.
Okay, so rewind.
You can say the same thing, just say and.
Yes, Chris, I agree with you. And we have to look at the order of events, which is that without the free-flowing money, they would never have been incentivized to create all this new department.
Right.
But I said, and I'm thinking, we have like, we need to get all these scientists to come and do research at our school because we need to get, be more famous and more popular. I look at Harvard having enough money in their endowment to pay for all their students and still make money. Their endowment will still grow. They could pay for all the students and still have their endowment grow, and yet they still charge $50,000 a year for school.
Yeah. You know what we used to call this? We used to call this stupid money, because when money comes too fast and too quick, literally it makes you stupid and you start doing stupid stuff with it. And so I was always trained to be very careful. If you get a large chunk of money coming in, like a lottery win or an inheritance or something, man, be very, very careful with that,
Well, we've been running off of stupid money for God knows how long, Scott. As a country, that's all we've ever gotten. And we continue to suffer the effects of it.
Since 1971?
I would say, since 1971. There is a great website called What the Fuck Happened in 1971. It's WTF happened. Well, I don't know if that's just Google it up. It shows you all of these charts about how once we got off the gold standard and got off of sound money, everything started to change. And the effects weren't very pronounced back then because it just takes time to compound. But now they're like, we all feel them. We all feel them.
Yeah.
So I had a question that came to mind when we were talking about printing money. So during COVID, government printed $2 trillion?
Yeah, more like 5, but
so 5 trillion.
What's a trillion here, a trillion there?
Let me ask you this. So there's the size of the economy, and then there's the amount of money that's around, right? And the amount of money is some smaller amount than the actual size of the economy when you measured in dollars. Mm-hmm. That money that was printed, was that part of just the economy's money, or was that actual money that was printed?
Actual money that was printed.
So basically, they didn't just impact the $30 trillion economy; they impacted the $12 trillion actual bank of money. So it's a much bigger impact. It's not a 15% impact on the economy. It's something like a third of the economy was printed in the last.
Okay,
years.
We're going to go down a level and get rid of a layer of abstraction. Okay. Because this is going to be important. So when we talk about money, there's two forms of money in the U.S. There's something called the base money, and then there's something called the broad money. Okay. So this is important because base money is your fundamental, all the money you've printed. And that in the US is roughly, I don't know the exact number, but I think it's like 9 to 15 trillion. Could be a little bit lower, but somewhere in that ballpark. And broad money is all the extra money that starts flowing around in the system, whether that be a combination of debt, assets, cash, trades, etc. And that generally falls between, I don't know, 30 to 70 or 30 to 100 trillion. It's a big range. I have to go back. It's been a while. But the differences between the two is, Chris, what you were just talking about. Hey, here's the economy money, which is the broad money, and here's the base money. If you influence the base, it has a multiplier effect on the broad. And that's very important. Whereas if you influence the broad, it's constrained by the base because you can only leverage so much off the base before there's just too much leverage in the system. So when they talk about too much leverage off the system, it's like, here is the base cash that fundamentally runs everything. And this is all of the extra money or leverage or debt that has been created off of this base. And so where the money printing gets dangerous is if you are influencing that base.
Yeah.
Which is what happened during COVID.
So just to illustrate the base versus the broad. So when I have 10 physical dollars, that's base money.
That's
right?
base money.
And I go to the bank and I put it in the bank. Now the bank takes that and takes $9 of that and loans it out to somebody else. They've now created $9 that don't really exist. And that's the broad. And then
broad is the 9 plus the 10 that you still have.
Yeah, so it's a everything. And then that person takes and puts it into their own bank, and at this point it's still broad money because he didn't have the actual dollars. And then the bank loans 8, like you said, and he puts it in the bank, and they loan 7, and so suddenly my $10 base becomes represented by $80-90 of broad.
Yes.
Okay? And then of course there's the transactions and the borrowing and all the different ways that money is created without actually having the base money.
Yes. And for folks like, you and just to give everyone, because folks always have questions about this. Well, how can this work? Because you have to spend the money sometime, right? Well, yeah, that's true. I can put $10 in. JP Morgan can take $9 and loan it to someone else. Okay, so let's say, Chris, you got $9. You take the $9 and you spend $8. Okay, you spend $8 and you buy something from Scott. Okay, but he's at JP Morgan. So all of a sudden it becomes a accounting transaction. They're not moving. They will showcase they moved $8 from you to Scott in the system, but in their minds, they're like, okay, well, it never left, so I can still loan out $7.
Oh, because it didn't actually do any real work then.
Because JP Morgan owns your money. It comes back to ownership. You don't own it.
Oh
right?
my God.
So that's why they can play these shenanigans. Because and then what happens when you pay another bank? Well, they just wait until the end of the day. Because there's only like 10 banks.
To settle it, yeah.
At the end of the day, they're like, okay, well, Bank of America, we sent, a bunch of guys from us sent over, 50 billion. You guys, a bunch of guys from you guys sent over 50.1 billion. Oh, okay, so we only owed you 100 million. Here's a $100 million check.
Oh, we'll settle out. So then I think what this is deciding is that God was right all along, because God says, I own everything. I own it. And basically, through my grace and because I love you, I'm going to give it to you, and you're just a manager of it.
So God, are you saying God is the bank?
Clearly.
I'm saying God is the bank. God is the owner of the entire universe, actually, of everything. So yes.
So maybe God is a bank.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that'd be highly, highly limiting. But yeah, at least that much, of course. Yeah. Absolutely. That is fascinating, actually, because it starts to get into some very philosophical arguments. It starts to get into discipline and self-control, and there's just all sorts of things that are going on here.
Yeah, and this goes back to where we started, right? Simplification and abstraction, right?
Yeah.
This is how we have abstracted so many things away to make it simple for people to pay with credit cards, for lack of a better term. But underlying it, these are all the games that are being played. Because you don't go to ownership, goes to how money flows, what money means, and it is just so complex that most people just can't understand how it works. They just know it works because when they pay with the money, they get something back. And for them, I would say that that's all what everyone wants, right? If I pay you my money, I want whatever I bought back, whether it be a microphone or
whatever it is. Yeah.
Or a
that's
pencil.
Amazing, actually.
So
I mean, so the fundamental change of getting off the gold standard, right, in 1971, this idea that every dollar has an inherent value because there's a piece of gold which took effort to mine. There's a piece of gold behind it, and then we took that away and said, no, it's still a dollar. The only thing behind it is the country, your government says it's worth this much money, right? So if the government fails, if the government fiddles around with it, so you can't manipulate the value. Well, maybe you can. You can't just go ahead and print greater values of gold and say, hey, gold is now worth more, so I can make more money. Now, though, since I'm not tied to anything, I can make as much money as I want, which means there's a free flow of excess money in the broader sense, which now means that, as when you have too much of anything, you act stupid. Like Scott was saying, you have stupid money. The whole country has stupid money. But just our valuations of how much something is worth are totally screwed up, right?
Yeah.
In my mind, I should still be able to go to McDonald's and get a meal for $5, and they're like 12, 13 now to get a meal.
Well, they changed their menu, Chris, so they have a value menu.
Yeah.
You can still eat.
The whole idea is, in my mind, I'm stuck in 2002. I don't know when that was appropriate, but it really, when you think about it, given how economies work and how industries work, things should have gotten cheaper if we keep going the curve of things getting more efficient and productive.
Well, some things aren't
exactly.
But instead, the amount of dollars goes up, and I'm not getting, and I may be getting more physical dollars, but the actual percentage of my income that I spend on that $5 Happy Meal, which is now a $13 meal,
right,
is actually a bigger percentage of my effort.
Well, that's like inflation. That's the devious thing because it's no big deal from year to year. It's no big deal, but it adds up. Is the problem?
What happens if we didn't have this money? If we went back to a gold standard or some kind of a standard and just stripped out the money? Obviously, there's all kinds of hell to pay for a while, but at some point, valuations would reestablish themselves based upon the amount of money available in the system, wouldn't it?
Well, it had a lot of people would die. Because what if you needed medical care? The doctor's like, well, I don't need a cow. What I need is a tractor. So if you don't have a tractor, I'm not going to
But the idea, if there's only, instead of a $50 trillion economy, let's say there's only $10 trillion available. So suddenly that $10 trillion has to now be spread across all of what was before $50 trillion. And so everything gets reevaluated at 1/5 the cost it was before. I mean, I'm oversimplifying here, but I
don't know.
Is that what would happen?
I can't even imagine that scenario happening. I mean, they would just be massive.
I can imagine this scenario happening as we have more and more class change and issues with the government not realizing how much money they're spending.
Well, I'll just throw this out there then for you, Scott, which is, what would be the first savings from a fiat? If you move off a fiat standard back to gold, the first savings you would get would be peace. There'll be no more war, because every single war is stupid money. Okay, so let's start off with that. So what does that mean? Automatically, well, you would save You would have saved $500 billion off of Ukraine, probably $10 trillion off of Afghanistan and Iraq. So, roughly speaking, we would be all fine and dandy. To be honest, your problem about Medicare solved. I mean, you would have just taken all of that money we spent in all these useless conflicts for the past 30 years to pay for Medicare and Social Security, and we would not be in the problems we are today.
My brain can't even I can't even think about that. I mean, I'm going to take a lot of time to think through that. It's like so foreign. It's like,
Yeah, because I would argue war is the pinnacle of stupid money. No one will go to war because you lose so much. You're spending materials building weapons of mass destruction. You're losing people who are if you just value people and their lifetime earnings and the taxes they contribute.
Yeah, the most valuable, the youngest, the most capable, or you send them up to fight, right?
And what happens if one of them could have been the next Elon Musk? That's the scariest. Like that's just like what you lose there is it's 100% stupid money.
Wait,
right?
let's go back and talk about why do wars start?
That goes into the realm of politics. Well, we'll save that for another time.
Can we instead? I think this kind of ties into that. If we look at how supply and demand works in an environment where you're on fiat currency versus an environment where you're on gold-backed currency, what happens when something I've got something that I'm selling, and it's worth $1?
Okay.
And you know, in a fiat currency, or sorry, let's go. In a gold-backed currency, you have $1. Now suddenly everyone wants it. I can charge more for it because people are willing to pay more. So now I charge you $2 for it. Mm-hmm. And now you've got to make a judgment call because you've only got a limited amount of money. Am I willing to steal $1 from somewhere else in my household to pay for this $2 item, right? However, in a fiat currency environment, you just borrow that money.
Yes.
So you don't have to make that hard decision of taking money from one place in your budget and putting it to buying this thing that I now charge $2 for. So you just magically create $1 out of nothing, and suddenly you're able to buy this thing. And I'm happy because I got my $2 and I'm ready to go. But we do that 1,000 times across 1 million people, and now we've just created, 1,000 and 1 million, it's 1 billion. We just created $1 billion because you borrowed it. And so now my $2 that I got really isn't worth the $2 because there's $1 billion more dollars in the world than there was a moment ago, right? And so in essence, that means there's more money floating around, which means people are just more free to spend money, which means when it comes to war, I want something, and what am I willing to do to get it? Well, I'll go to cyber warfare, I'll go to economic warfare, I'll go to whatever, and eventually I might go to physical warfare. Because I got the money to spend on it.
Yes, because you don't have to sacrifice, exactly to your analogy, you don't have to sacrifice something at home. Because if you were on the sound money, you would have to pay gold for war. The problem is, if you lose that war, or even if you don't win with outsized returns, your gold supply goes down, which means you don't have the capabilities of declaring war in the future. Or you can't pay your soldiers, so you're risking revolution. Or the fact that you can't do X, Y, and Z because the total assets you've dedicated to destruction have been so vast that you've shrunk what you can spend in the future. Yeah. But on a fiat money standard, you don't have that problem. Thus, it's just become stupid money.
Oh my gosh, that's so amazing. So this is the essence. I love bringing up jiu-jitsu because I studied jiu-jitsu for a while. And I'm really bad at it. But this is the essence of fighting. Is you have to make if you're in a real fight, you have to make a very clear decision because there's a tremendous risk to you personally because you could lose. So you got to make sure that what you're fighting for is worth it. Like my mom said, you got to pick your fights carefully, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes you just, okay, whatever, I'll just take that one on the chin. But that's amazing. So that's what countries do, right? So let's say a country says, typically a fight will happen because I want some resource that you claim and I want it, right? And if you don't give it to me, I'm going to come take it with a stick. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But so
if I don't have a good chance of winning, I'm not going to take that bet because I could lose more than I gain.
Absolutely. Yeah, like a real fight. It's real, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
But if I can just magically create money off the backs of my people to go build the resources that I need to go fight this war, suddenly the risk is spread out amongst everyone. It doesn't feel the same, right?
That's exactly
you're not risking as much.
You're not even just risking as much, right? You're just creating inflation because no one knows it. Because I mean, like, how else do you explain U.S. losing every single freaking war and still being a super powerhouse, right? We've lost Vietnam. U.S. didn't win. Korean War didn't win. I mean, like, what is the Afghanistan war? 10 years. And I mean, we were basically humiliated on the way out. Yeah. Right? Ukraine, we've practically lost. You name the war since then and now, we've lost every single war. And yet we're still where we are because it's stupid money.
So
we set the groundwork.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
After World War II, we set the groundwork where the U.S. was the centralized source of money, with the dollar being the thing. And then we got off the gold standard, and we printed a lot of money. And people gave us money.
Chris, we got to make some merch. We got to make a shirt that says "Don't be stupid." You know what? It's so funny because Dave Ramsey talks about this. He's like, he'll have people call into his show and he'll say, man, that was stupid with a capital S, you know, what you just did. So I'm like, crazy. So there's a lot of stupid people going on, right?
There's always stupid stuff.
Oh my God, I can't tell you how many times I've done stupid stuff. So, wow.
Okay.
But imagine if you're risking other people's money or other people's lives or other people's whatever. Suddenly, the risk to yourself, I mean, let's face it, from politicians, the risk is pretty low to themselves that anything really bad is going to happen to them. They can make decisions that impact everyone else at very little risk to themselves.
Yeah, right. And they get all the upside, or most of the upside, with very little risk.
Yeah.
That's, you know, there's a certain part of me that says there's a certain evilness about that. It's like we talked about before, like some of this stuff always goes back to some form of selfishness, you know?
It does. Guys, sorry, I do have to drop soon. So maybe we wrap this up. And then I know we were supposed to talk about Bitcoin, but maybe we can do that for another time.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
All
right.
For me, this was great, guys. Hopefully,
that sounds great.
Yeah, hopefully this was very entertaining for you guys as well.
Thanks, Kevin.
That's all that matters as long as we're entertained. That's all. You know, Kevin, in the world of like marketing, the only thing that matters is if your customer's entertained. Entertainment first, and then a fast second is education. But they got to have fun.
Completely agree. Completely agree. Okay.
That's awesome. All right, so this is a good time to wrap up, or?
I think so.
I don't know. Do you want to have us continue on, Scott, or you want to just go and call it quits for the day?
You know, I think I'd like to wrap it up since we did yesterday too. I think this is a great chunk of content. I think.
Yeah, no, it was really good. Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. We really appreciate it.
So we'll do a whole thing on Bitcoin and crypto then, because that's a topic that you can go on forever. I know.
Yeah, I just lost a ton of money on crypto. I hate crypto. In fact, I've just sold it all. So yeah.
We should definitely talk about that.
We need to definitely talk about.
We should definitely talk about that.
I got caught up in the whole stupid thing. I'm like, oh, it's going up. It's going. I got to buy now, and then it started crashing. You know. So
yeah, we should definitely talk about that.
Yeah, that's super good. All right.
Okay.
So I'm going to hit stop now.